Hello, my name is Dr. Andrea Carter, and I'm going to share with you my dissertation. I successfully defended my dissertation over 3 weeks ago, and I'm proud to say that I would like to share with you some of the things that has helped me along this journey. What I'm going to do in this video is just present to you, I'm just going to go straight through and I'm going to present to you at my actual defense, my dissertation defense. And the next video that I actually post, I'm going to go step by step. But so I really want you to get a feel of what it looks like to successfully defend a dissertation. I talked to my chair, I talked to my committee members and my university officials who actually attended my defense, and I asked them, was there something I could have done differently? What can I have done to improve? And they said that my defense was really good. They didn't have any pointers to share, and they said I did exceptionally well. So I just want to share with you what I've done so you can actually do this exceptionally well too. So let's just get started. The title: The Faculty Role and Retention of African American Students at Milwaukee Colleges. This is the agenda. As you can see, it's about 11 to 12 slides. Some of your programs may have more slides, but you're going to get the gist because I had the 11 slides, but I covered everything from start to finish. Any ambiguities you may have had, or any concerns, any questions, any issues, I made sure that those items were covered during my defense. You want to make sure that you introduce yourself. You also want to thank everyone for their time and their presence, whether you invited friends, family, peers, but you want to also thank your chair. You also want to give thanks to your committee members that were there throughout the years to provide you with supervision. The problem that led to my research is a personal one. To share with you a little bit about the background history, I'm a University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee alumni. Just like so many other undergrad students, I longed for a sense of belonging and felt the need to be connected. Having someone that looked like me in a space where I was the minority helped immensely. I became engaged in school organizations and felt motivated to participate in school activities. This also positively impacted my grades. The opposite was also true. Every time I found someone to connect with that gave me a sense of belonging, the connection was broken prematurely because they were no longer part of the university due to withdrawing from their studies. I became disengaged and disconnected in school. After sharing my story with a few faculty members, they welcomed me, became invested in my studies, making me feel valued and respected. This is especially important for students that have a history of being marginalized, and such as minority groups. Many peers that I started out with did not end with me. This happened far too many times. My experience transpired over 20 years ago, so let's go ahead and move forward. Although the U.S. have had colleges since the 1600s, the topic of student retention was first introduced by John Neely in 1938. The issue of student retention has become a controversial subject across various educational fields due to the different techniques and approaches to achieving student retention. In Neely's study, he examined multiple issues related to the departure of students at multiple institutions and published his study in 1938. Well, at the time, it was not deemed important until enrollment began to disappear in the 1970s. During the 80s, the anticipated decline in the number of traditional students returned. And so some people start having an interest regarding Neely's study. Most recent student studies discussed four-year institutions, since then that was the most enrolled students and enrolled institutions. My study involved not only the four-year institutions, but also two-year colleges as well. McNeely's study in 1938 was inspired by Tinto's research which involves social integration. And you'll hear that I'm talking a lot about Tinto's research in my study, within my study. In most instances, student retention is a problem for three reasons. You have the developmental immaturity that results in education complications. You have emotional naivete, which results in extremely unsettling behaviors. And you have failure to pass standardized proficiencies or attainment of target grades at the accomplishment of the learning periods. Leadership and educational programs have mainly focused on managing student retention. Most leaders focus on educational performances and financial achievements to measure success. This means that focus has shifted away from student engagement programs, which have led to higher dropout rates across Milwaukee colleges. The research questions that were investigated in my study is: how do African American students attending Milwaukee colleges perceive their experiences regarding student retention? And what are the perceptions of African American students attending Milwaukee colleges on the role of faculty regarding student retention? I just want to make this point. I didn't make this point during my presentation, but I want to let you know that we want to use just 3 to 6 bullet points on each one of our PowerPoint presentations, our PowerPoint slides. We also want to what we don't want to do is read off our PowerPoints, but because we are actually presenting to our committee. Okay, so I just want to make sure that you keep that in mind. Now, when you're talking about your research questions, when you're talking about your problem statement, you want to make sure that those are verbatim what is in your study. Okay, but the other slides, you want to just have the phrases and just bullet points for each one of your ideas, just so they can help you, spark what you're going to be presenting. But we do not want to read off the slides, and we don't want to have paragraphs on our slides, just 3 to 6 bullet points per each slide. Okay, let's continue. The problem on a broader spectrum. Currently in the United States, there is a high dropout rate in higher learning institutions. Additionally, there is a great disparity in the student dropout and retention rates in institutions of higher learning among certain groups. This is because students of color, such as African Americans and Hispanics, have a higher dropout rate and lower retention rates than their white counterparts. Therefore, one of the vital goals for all higher learning institutions is to retain students to ensure that they complete their degrees. Okay, research is replete. In the last 50 years, research is replete with documented best practices, theoretical frameworks, as well as research investigations that focus on student retention. So we don't lack any research regarding student retention. We're not in a deficit with that. But what we are in a deficit is when we talk about the faculty role, okay, in African American student retention. Okay, there is a gap regarding how faculty and overall administration play a role in student retention in colleges. Specifically, there are inadequate studies that have focused on faculty's role in African American students in colleges, and thus the recommendation of study student retention in colleges. Nonetheless, there is limited literature that's focused on the role of faculty in retaining African American students in colleges. Hypothetically speaking, African American students who don't have a sense of belonging and feel disconnected during their college tenure may become non-completers by withdrawing from their programs. If students feel valued and supported by faculty during their higher learning experiences, there would be an increase in African American student retention, which would lead to college completion. My research is going to bridge the gap through investigating the faculty's role on retention of African American students at Milwaukee colleges. Student retention definitely is a complex issue. It's a definitely complex issue, as we already have talked about that. It is one of the most important measures of success at a university, as it affects the rankings, it affects reputation and financial well-being. Improving retention is beneficial for higher education institutions. Additionally, student retention affects the United States as a whole. The public economy benefits with increased tax revenue, individual economic benefits, higher salaries, public social benefits, reduced crime rates, and individual social benefits, and it also increases the quality of life. The loss of revenue that is substantiated when a student doesn't persist is staggering. By decreasing student attrition, we can save millions of public dollars. That's why understanding the faculty role in student retention is vitally important. It's very imperative. By being able to investigate the faculty role in student retention, universities can better allocate resources to the students and faculty-led programs. And we're not, in no way am I saying that it's the faculty's fault, but the student has a responsibility as well as the faculty. The purpose of this descriptive qualitative study is to investigate the role of faculty in retaining African American students at Milwaukee colleges from the student's perspective, in hopes that the faculty can develop and support effective policies and programs to improve the persistence of African American students. We're going to look at the theoretical framework. Therefore, there are going to be 4 theories that I'm looking at, and the theoretical framework is comprised of 1 or more formal concepts theories along with empirical findings from the literature. And Tinto's theory of institutional departure model, it was one of the threads. It was something that I was able to identify or engage with throughout my study. So you're going to hear a lot about that. It assumes that social integrating learners into the campus communities increase their commitment to learning institutions. Okay. And students are more likely to graduate if they're immersed, if they're able to make their transition from their community to college life. Tinto's believe that they're more susceptible to actually completing their college program. The learner development theory states that some students are highly involved in their studies, which means that they use a large amount of their time learning and partaking in student groups, interacting with faculty, associates, as well as other learners. The developmental theory explains the biological, social, and emotional development as stages over a portion of a whole lifespan. And you have the research theory that actually came up just a little bit in my study, and it's a wide range of resources which is deemed to enhance a student's learning, including physical facilities, human resources, fiscal resources, counselors, research, and endowments. And there were pretty much a number of financial implications and lack of resources when I was actually interviewing my participants. Okay. The methodology that was used, there are 2 main research methods that are used in carrying out a study. You have the quantitative and the qualitative methods. The quantitative research method collects and analyzes mathematical, numerical, and statistical data, while the the quantitative research method can find averages as well as patterns, make predictions, test causal relationships, and generalize findings to wider populations. The advantages of this particular research methodology is that you have a larger sample, higher accuracy, faster, and it's easier and it's more cost effective. The disadvantages of quantitative research, which I did not care too much for, was that it didn't really offer many insights, since the findings are based on numerical responses that could be limiting, since the preset answers do not reflect the response's true feelings. And what I needed That wasn't the best option for my research, and what I needed was to dig deeper. I wanted to know the why. I wanted to get into the student psyche, their consciousness, to see the why they felt the way they felt and perceived some of the things that they perceived. So to carry out my study, my research focused on the qualitative research design, and by using the qualitative methodology, again, I was able to capture what my participants felt regarding the study. Using this method, I explored the faculty role in the retention of students from the students' perspectives. The qualitative study methodology involves the gathering and evaluating non-statistical data such as the audio, the video, or text to understand experiences, opinions, or concepts. This really allowed me to collect in-depth insights into issues along with generating new ideas for the study. This type of research method emphasized understanding events from the participants' viewpoints, as in this study. Basically, the qualitative method examines the why certain situations happen as they do rather than the how such situations happen as they do. It is vital to note that this method is non-numeric, which implies that it does not contain quantifiable data. The need to use a qualitative research method is due to observing students' opinions regarding the role of faculty in African American student retention. Additionally, the need to use a qualitative research method is due to the time constraints and costs needed to carry out the research during a pandemic. It was rather difficult, I'll put it that way. The study I used interviews from 20 students to collect my data. Additionally, the sampling technique that I used was a purposive sampling technique. This sampling technique was used to sample students in Milwaukee colleges. The need to use this sampling technique was due to, again, financial and time constraints. Additionally, the COVID-19 has affected the study in terms of the purposive using the sampling. The initial sampling size of the participants was to 20 students in Milwaukee colleges. There was no need for additional participants due to the fact that data saturation was reached and I was getting some of the same answers over and over again. Prior to collecting the data, I'm very, very familiar with the IRB process, the Internal Review Board. So I received the IRB application approval prior to conducting my research, and make sure that that's what you do. Make sure that you do that. Interviews lasted anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, and I analyzed my data using a software called In Vivo. The literature review was conducted to provide background knowledge of the past leadership structures in relation to attrition rates. This implies that both primary and secondary data was collected as well as analyzed. The study of leadership roles and student retention rates is necessary to refine the courses of school dropouts, which includes unclear college visions, integrity questions, poor self-confidence among learners, a lack of commitment on the part of college administration. The data collection, you want to really, as you can see with the data collection, this slide has more information than most of the other slides. You really want to make sure that you dig in here and you don't leave any gaps or any holes, and you let your committee know, your university officials know how your data was collected. What I did when I collected my data was it was very difficult because the universities had actually closed down. I was not able to go on campus, and that was my goal, was to go on campus and look for students in the common areas to see who would be interested in participating. So what I had to do is go on social media, and I was able to reach out to some of the black student unions, the black organizations, African American organizations, to see if I would be able to find participants for my study, and I was able to do that. And then I reached out via social media to those students or cell phone, and then I actually met with the students prior to I talked to them prior to even scheduling an interview to interview them for the study, just to let them know what the expectations were. I also want to let you know that make sure that if you have any type of biases that you address them, so you won't sway any answers that the students may have. For example, one of my biases was that I didn't have the best undergrad college experience at my predominantly white university, and I had some professors that I had evidence to support that they weren't really warm to students that didn't look like them or had a different shade or was from a different persuasion, and they had no problem with showing that, and so I had to make sure that those feelings and that those issues were addressed prior to me interviewing my students, my participants. This study used open-ended interview questions as a data source. Instrumentation is linked not merely to the evaluation, selection, and instrument design, but as well to the conditions under which the predetermined instruments will be administered. I did conduct a field test to validate the questions with four participants. I modified my questions based on my field participants' recommendations. And that's really, really good to do a field test. When you have all your interview questions and you choose maybe a professor or a couple of students or whatever your population would be, and you ask them and you test the questions out on them based on your research questions, and you test the interview questions out and see what type of modifications. And if you have some of the same concerns, from your participants, from your field test participants that are coming across your desk, maybe you might want to make some adjustments or, modifications to your questions. And that's what I did. Okay. My in-depth interview questions, you will use research questions. They were my research questions that was constructed through a specific systemic. My interviews, I used my research questions and to formulate my interview questions, and that's what I did. As you can see, I went through the process, and I recorded the Zoom and video calls. The first step was the data analysis. I transcribed the raw data, and I began to engage with my data. I engaged with the data that I was able to retrieve from my participants. And as I engage with the data, I start just seeing, just different commonalities with the particular data that I engage with. Okay. When I did that, as you can see, I looked at the recorded interviews and my notes that was taken into the interview, and I transcribed the data, and I began to label the pieces. After labeling the relevant pieces, the next step was coding, and that's when I was able to use NVivo, which was a computer software that helped me to code and identify the themes. But I don't want to say that you want to make sure that you engage with your data. There were 18 codes that came out, and these are some of the clubs, organizations, student organizations, and these codes actually collapse into the 5 categories. I want to go to my findings, and I want you to know that with this part, I really, really want you to take your time, because the findings is almost like the most important part of your research regarding, in addition to, the significance and the importance of your research. But what did you find out? What did you find out? And I found out This study examined again the role of faculty, okay, in retaining African American students in Milwaukee colleges. What I found out was that according to NCES, there were approximately 2.1 million student dropouts aged 16 to 24 in 2018, while the overall student dropout rate was 5.2. NCES indicated that the student dropout rate varied according to ethnicity, ACT, or race in 2018. Ethnicity, and race in 2018. NCES, in my research, it is evident that the student dropout rate for Asians was 1.9, the whites it was 4.2, and with African Americans it was 6.4, Hispanics was 8.0. Numerous studies have focused on student dropout rate and student retention rates, but SUSA focused on factors that led to the low student retention and found that the immaturity that we discussed, the standardized tests, the emotional naivete was also were causes for the low retention rates. UNESCO indicated that most of the world's students drop out of schools due to lack of better interventions and unsustainable retention programs. However, there is limited published literature that has focused on the role of leadership, the role of faculty in retaining African American college students. Now, I did look at the different orientation sessions that colleges have prior to students beginning or at the beginning of their college tenure. The orientation sessions could provide students with factors in their own background which can affect their dropout chances if they are structured a certain way. Our findings: social integration was so important for African American student retention. There were numerous opportunities that were provided to students to participate in student-faculty relationship development, clubs, organizations, students becoming a teacher assistant in office hours, and many others. The faculty had been helpful in providing information to students, but students need to reach out to the faculty in an effort to obtain that information. The faculty or institution had contributed to retaining students through providing support options such as having programs and groups that cater to minority students and having diverse staffing. Students do not receive an adequate academic evaluation from their institution or faculty. This is evident in that there are institutions that do not provide a grade scale to measure the academic proficiency for their students. So these are our findings here again. There are a number of reasons why African American college students drop out of colleges. However, it has been argued that the lack of effective leaders to guide and support this particular group has led them to drop out of college. In no way am I saying that the students do not have a responsibility in their education, but again, faculty has a responsibility as well. This study has shown that there is a need to look at the role of faculty in retaining African American students at Milwaukee colleges. The findings of this study have indicated that faculty assist African American students to navigate through their time in college, from their enrollment to instilling numerous college programs which promote their success. It has been evident that some colleges have assumed responsibility for African American college students to succeed and commit themselves to reduce problematic trends that are disadvantageous to this particular population. The study findings have indicated that faculty members aid and support this particular group by ensuring that they are readily available to assist in curriculum and extracurricular activities. For instance, faculty members have focused on mentoring this particular group by offering them academic guidance, such as courses in which they need to enroll. This mentorship has been vitally important and helpful in reducing African American college students' dropout rates. Implications of the study. Milwaukee colleges need to adopt effective retention strategies to ensure that there is a high retention rate among African American students. For instance, there is a need to ensure that students are aware of the retention policies that colleges have put in place. To ensure that there is effective faculty-student engagement, there is a need to enhance the student-faculty relationships. For instance, there is a need to ensure that professors are readily available for students outside of the classroom setting. There is a need to hold professors equally accountable for the students' academic performance. Holding professors equally accountable for the students' academic performance can ensure that student skills and knowledge are developed, hence enhancing student retention. Additionally, to ensure that there is effective faculty-student engagement, there is a need to enhance the student-faculty relationship. For instance, there is a need to ensure that professors are readily available to the students outside of their classroom setting. The findings of the studies have some implications for practice. For instance, the findings of the studies have imperative implications for colleges. Again, just being able to adopt those retention strategies, okay? And one of the recommendations is for further study, what I would do is to conduct a quantitative study that focuses on the faculty's role in retaining African American students in colleges, because this was a qualitative study. And looking at the findings, and this is because this study has focused on qualitative research design, as we stated before, which means that the data cannot be quantified to provide an accurate amount of the issues under investigation. As well, the study has focused on African American students. Therefore, another recommendation for further study is to focus on students of color, since the literature review has shown that students of color, such as Hispanics, also have a high dropout rate. Since this study was conducted at Milwaukee colleges, it is recommendable for the study to be carried out in other geographical locations. The aim and purpose of this study was to examine the role of faculty retaining African American students in Milwaukee colleges. The study has shown that there are numerous opportunities that faculty provide to the students, such as support options, advisory support, as well as learning materials. The study has shown that students believe that even though the faculty play a major role in their retention, the retention strategies are ineffective. For instance, students of color are racially discriminated against when they seek assistance from the faculty. Additionally, some of the professors are unapproachable when students need their assistance. This implies that there is a need to recognize the role of faculty in retaining African American students in an effort to provide them with better opportunities to be successful and have high student retention rates. My next step in my scholarly career is to possibly develop programs for faculty to assist with student retention. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope that I said something that was able to assist you in successfully defending your dissertation as well.